Welcome back into another episode of Georgia in the Jungle, presented by Remington Tavern. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. They can be found on Instagram at RemyTav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, we begin another show on your Tuesday night. The Cincinnati Bearcats did not win a game. There are no moral victories.
No.
But this team gave you something to believe in this past weekend.
That was a heck of a football game and a lot of fun to watch, and kind of frustrating to watch too if you're rooting from the Cincinnati side of things, because you look at some of the mistakes that were made, and you know the Sorsby was going to throw an interception at some point. You hate to see a pick six early in the fourth quarter that kind of put them in a hole to where they really had to play some catch up.
You hate to see a pick six end up, or his first interception of the season end up a pick six.
Right. It's one he talked about after the game. Tried something he shouldn't have. Then a fumble earlier in the game led to a score for Texas Tech. Then you had the two missed field goals that weren't chip shots. Certainly he's got plenty of leg to get him. The one was hooked a little bit. The one was pushed a little bit. It's a shame. If he'd kicked the second one first and the first one second, he would have made them both. It was very frustrating. And then all the weird clock stuff at the end, and just it was. But as you said, I mean, not a moral victory, but to go on the road Saturday night, blackout, great environment down there. And them to embrace it and perform the way they did in the Big 12 game. And it does serve notice that they may be able to turn this thing around a little quicker than what people thought, and also be competitive in a lot of these Big 12 games this year. And they were competitive in many last year that they could have closed, but this is a little different feeling. I think what sucks is you got this good feeling after Houston that maybe the defense is catching on. And, you can't give up 44 and expect to win every week. That was they gave up way too many rushing yards. And they, again, there were those other mistakes, and that's not on the defense, a pick six. But you give up 230 yards rushing, and you're going to be in some trouble in a football game. And UC was. It's just, Aaron, I just feel like that's a game they maybe should have won.
You can't help but feel like that, especially after that fourth quarter. That's I think, a natural feeling as a fan. They did everything. The Texas Tech continued to give them opportunities to stay in the game. Or you could argue that Cincinnati found ways to stay in the game. And however you want to look at it, it just, to your point, I mean, when you play a team and they don't punt the whole game, we saw that last week with the Bengals. I mean, when you're doing things like that, it's not going to serve you well.
No, you're rarely going to win those games. But when I mean, they got beat up during that game. They lost some key players and there was one running back after another there. And hopefully one of them's going to be okay by the time they play Central Florida, because that's a problem. But to see, they've got to play most of the game without Kiner. Then Pryor has to go out, and Covey comes in and looks really darn good. Then he ends up being hurt on that last drive, and that hurt him as well. What are you going to do? I mean, I don't know, and that cost him some time on the clock because he had to leave, and it just
23 seconds.
everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Yeah, and losing time on the targeting call where they didn't call targeting, but then it's not it's not an unnecessary roughness, right? It's like, okay, he hit him. If I were Scott Satterfield, I would have been just as well. I think he was annoyed. I think he was baffled by how that unfolded and how okay, you wipe out the targeting, but there's nothing else there, even though Sorsby clearly got hit. But those are bang bang and all that. But I don't know how you do the targeting thing and then just wipe it out completely. I mean, you saw something, and maybe it wasn't targeting, but he hit him.
Well, I can answer that for you, George, because the guy who threw the flag was the back judge 30 feet away.
Right.
30 feet away from everything happening, not the
right.
Line judge or anybody else who's near the play. It's the guy who knows something happened because he's also the head ref, by the way. And they lost the ref on the first drive of the game.
When he got stepped on.
Texas Tech used him to set a pick, and then he hobbles off the field because he's like 65 years old and got stepped on.
Hey.
Just saying. This is the problem, though, when you got these old refs out there that probably because we don't have a union for refs, and that's a whole different discussion. But
that was a messed up play, though, down at the goal line where he did use that ref for a pick, the umpire, and then he gets stepped on, and and I know the announcers were saying the defender was, wondering where the help was. Well, I thought immediately he was like saying, "Hey, I just got picked by an official on this play." Well, I thought that's what his beef was.
Correct. Because it was. The announcers refused to actually acknowledge the fact that there was a ref there until he's hobbling off the field on looking like he's leaving a war zone.
Right. It was a tough loss. It really is. It's a game I feel like they played well enough to win, except on that defensive side of the ball. So it was a hell of a game. Okay, you're not going to win all the close ones. UC's got to be tired of losing close ones since they joined the Big 12 because they lost a few of those last year. But I like you, I'm probably a little more encouraged than discouraged by what I saw Saturday night. I just hope like hell a lot of these kids get healthy enough and can get back for UCF.
Last year's team would not have been in this game in the fourth quarter. Not just because they didn't have the skill to get there, but if they had lost the starting and backup running backs, if they had lost the number one receiver on that team, who was still also Xavier Henderson, if they had, just being decimated by the injuries and being down the way that you were down, which came off of turnovers largely, last year's team could never have decided we're still in this. We're going to make a play for the tie at the end of the game. They would have been over, truthfully, probably after that. If they had been in the game, last year's team would have been out after the Evan Pryor fumble.
Yeah, probably so. Which speaks to the character that they've been talking about with this team and the way they've changed that whole outlook with the locker room and guys, not getting down, not hanging their head so much and pointing fingers and, essentially saying the hell with it. We're getting our butts kicked. Let's get out of here. They battled, even after that pick six. And, it's looking bleak. And they found a way to get to the point where they could have sent that game to overtime. And, the pick six was bad, but to me, Sorsby continues to impress. There's another reason they wouldn't have been in that game, because they would not have gotten 420 some yards passing last year and 4 touchdowns out of that position. And when you start thinking about how many games this kid has actually played and started in college football, and you're seeing these results already, pretty promising.
I'm not mistaken, that was his 12th. I'm not mistaken, that was his 12th game started. 426 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also led the team in rushing, 12 attempts, 52 yards. Also, it was the most yards by a Bearcat since 2015. It was the 9th most in Cincinnati history. And it did also earn Brendan Sorsby a second-time honoree of the Big 12 Newcomer of the Week. That's the second time he's won that this year. Just amazing numbers. And to do all of that while pretty much not having a rushing attack. Even, I know you said Manny Covey came in and looked good, and he did. But that was largely as a receiver on the screens, the dump-offs, not as a rusher, where he finished 8 carries, 15 yards. Not great there. The team finishes 33 for 129, and again, 52 of those yards were from Brendan Sorsby. So he put the team on his back in a way that we have not seen anyone do really since Dez.
Right. No, that's totally that was definitely a performance that would remind you of the way Dez could do that and did do that in several different ways. And some, I mean, didn't he break off like a 91-yard run once down in East Carolina? Was that where that? Yeah. Stuff like that. That's just, I mean, that's just magic. And that's the kind of feeling you get out of Sorsby, that he's capable. I don't know about going 91 yards, but he's certainly, other than the law, his decision.
Dez also wasn't going to pass for 400 yards.
Right. I mean, it was just it was a hell of a performance by him, and it should give everyone hope, that they can keep building this thing and trending in the right direction. I'd also wrote down the second Texas Tech TD. Oh my gosh, the broken tackle, and then he busted for probably 40 yards or whatever that touchdown was. The defender kind of probably went more for the strip than the tackle, and that was costly. And that's just, man, you just can't give up those big plays when it turns out to be a 3-point game. But those little things add up, and UC made too many of those mistakes. But again, they were right there at the end, a road game, Saturday night game, and had to overcome a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff went wrong where UC could have said the heck with it and didn't. I don't want to say it's a moral victory, but they need to win games. But it gives me hope. It gives me hope that this staff and this group can continue to improve, and maybe they can still get to that goal of making a bowl game and doing a little better in the Big 12 than what we saw and what's predicted for them this year.
Also, by the way, those 478 total yards by Brendan Sorsby were also the most by a Bearcat since 2015, and was the 5th most in school history total yards.
Yeah, those are crazy numbers.
Yes, without a doubt. And I think that, say what you will, one way or the other, good or bad, about Coach Satterfield, but you had to like what he was dialing up the whole game offensively.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's calling the shots. And I mean, you again, not to beat a dead horse, no pun intended, but Corey Kiner goes down and Evan Pryor goes down, and you still find ways to get a boatload of yards, calling the right plays, scheming the right guys open. I mean, to put that much faith in a kid like Manny Covey was astounding. On that screen, they had to have seen something to know that he was going to break on that screen the way he did. Otherwise,
Right.
you're not. I don't think you're calling a screen in that situation.
Right. Yeah, we talked earlier. I'm excited about his ability. I know the rushing yards didn't pop, but I think that kid's going to help them. I really do. He's got a lot of good football ahead of him. what did you make though? So it got really wonky late in the game with the onside kick thing, and then Tech calls a timeout, which is good. You're like, okay, they got them to spend a timeout there. Whether or not that's going to hurt Tech, given they had to lead at the time, I don't know. But and then that little pooch thing, which didn't kill them, it ended up being the ball in the 30 or whatever. But I wasn't quite in tune with all that. And what did you make of that? Because do you remember this?
I do.
It was odd.
I actually loved the pooch kick because it got when they set up for the onside kick, it did get Texas Tech to burn a timeout, which is what you want, especially late in the game. And you're going for the tie, the win, whatever it is that you have your mindset on. You're going for points, certainly. And you also don't want to give Texas Tech more opportunities than you have to. So you got them to burn a timeout in that situation. I also didn't hate the pooch. I don't think it's something that you're really at this point going to be able to do again in the season because the film's out on it now. But Texas Tech had not been returning it really well by any stretch. I want to say that they were starting some drives as far back as the 15. I think they, on one drive in particular, they started at the 15. And I think on the pooch, they ended up at the 30. I don't think that.
Yeah.
So it didn't
3 yards on that play, I think.
It didn't end up burning you a whole lot. And
no,
I think that truthfully, since they did set up for the onside, I think that was probably your highest percentage kick for trying to recover the ball.
Yes, and I get they're doing that. I just felt like, for me, I didn't feel like, given the fact that they had timeouts and all that, I guess they had less confidence in their own defense, UC did, than I did. And I would have liked to try to pin them back a little bit more because I didn't think it was complete desperation time. I know they didn't punt.
There was only one drive where you stopped them on downs, and that was early on. But yeah,
I just
stop anything.
I don't know. I just would have liked to pin them back a little bit more. I'm probably crazy. That's why I'm not a football coach. But I guess that's what that was all about. I wasn't a big fan of it at the time, but I will tell you, I was probably, I don't know, 4 of these in by that point in the game. So I was a little bothered by it. And I thought about it later. I'm like, God, I get it. I get it. You can't. I don't know. It just. I don't know that I would have done it, given the success they were having, pinning them back a little bit. But I guess UC was going more for the ball than the field position, and I can kind of get that too. But damn, there was just plenty of time for me still to play with and have a little faith that you can come up with something and get a stop somewhere, or maybe force Texas Tech into some kind of situation where they make a mistake. But hell of a ball game. Hell of a ball game. And, Big 12 football is fun. That was a hell of a shootout.
I would take 100 of those games over what we had to watch between pretty much the Fenway Bowl through the end of the season last year.
Yes, agree wholeheartedly. And also, it's really cool going on the road and playing in these environments that remind you of a Nippert-like environment or give you a big-time feel. Like if I'm a casual fan flipping back and forth from Bama, Georgia to that game, and the Bama game got out of hand for a while, and I flip over to that and see that, I'm kind of interested in that. That was an entertaining game, and that was an entertaining environment. And it was a lot of fun to watch that football game, and it beat, watching the old American Conference games where you're at Tulane and there's more empty seats than fans, or some of these other venues they played in on the road where it was just like, oh my God, if enough people don't care to show up in their hometown to watch this team play, why would anyone want to watch it? You don't get that feeling with these games. This is legit stuff, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I was I was ecstatic about that part of it, to be honest. I just thought it felt big time.
It's just unfortunate, actually, that it was going up against Alabama and
Yeah.
Georgia, and they had the type of game that they had,
Oh
because
my gosh. Well, when it was a blowout, I'm like, great, people will tune over and all that. And then that thing went haywire as all get out. And fortunately, I was able to turn over and catch some of that. And I mean, wow, what an ending to a game there, too. I mean, you can't script that stuff. And that's what makes all this so special. And the NFL is really good in their product, and they have a lot of finishes like that, and a lot of games come down to the wire. But my God, I still feel like you see more crazy crap in college football than you see in any other sport, where it just, you watch a game and there's something you can't even describe in darn near every game you watch that involves big time teams or Power Four football. It just the athletes are amazing. It's not as quite, although the NFL is not quite as buttoned down as it used to be. It used to be a little more buttoned down and kind of stoic, and everybody ran the same offenses and same sets and stuff. But college football it's out of control. And I mean, I'm looking at that next game in 2 weeks. That's UC lost. It sucks, but I'm juiced to see them back on the field.
I should be down there for that one, actually, down in Orlando.
Oh man, be careful. I haven't had good reports out of going to games in Orlando. I've gone to basketball games there at UCF, and you know how they are. Basketball is kind of just blah down there in a way.
This will be the second one for me. But it is true what they say about being in the press box at the bounce house. You do feel that stadium shaking. It's insane.
I know. I don't even know how that's safe. Is it? I guess it's designed to do that.
Sure, I think that's what they tell you, so you don't believe you're going to die.
The worst experience I had in the press box, and it's funny. Somebody brought it up to me this weekend about where they used to have the high school football championships for Kentucky, and did you ever see the old Louisville Fairgrounds Stadium? So they used to have AAA baseball there, and the Louisville Cardinal football team played there. And
the last game I went to at Louisville was actually Lamar Jackson was still there.
Okay, so that would have been in Papa John's.
No, I take that back. Teddy Bridgewater was there. It was Teddy. It was Teddy against Munchie.
Okay, and that was probably Papa John's too, right?
Yeah, I think that was also
that old fairground stadium. They had a press box, and they had this roof come out, and the press box hung off the bottom of the roof, and you had to take this catwalk out, and you're walking above the stands, and you start out, you're even with the stands, and then you're walking straight out to this thing. Well, the stands go down. Pretty soon, you're looking down like, I don't know, it felt like 70 feet or more to me, and I got a fear of heights. Then you're in this thing that's just hanging off this roof, and you're like, my God, I hope they've inspected these bolts recently. I mean, it just was not. I think my hands were sweating the entire time. I left the press box at halftime and said, screw this. I was able to go down. I remember that about that old Cardinals stadium. And the other thing I remember was way back, and this would have been early 80s, probably at the early 80s at the latest. And Nipper was probably the only place where you could buy beer in college football, except for Louisville. I went down there, and I didn't know. And I walk in, it's like, my God, they sell beer. For a while, I believe Nipper and the old Fairground Stadium were the only two places in college football where you could go get a beer and watch the game. Isn't that crazy? Now, recently, pretty much everyone has it now, but even like Ohio State and places like that didn't have it till recently, if I recall it correct.
Yeah, I think Big 12 might have been the last ones.
Yeah, it was funny because you take it for granted, like being at Nippert all the time, and then you go on the road and it's like, you don't sell beer? It's like, no, son, that's why we have tailgating. It's like, yeah, okay, now I get it. But yeah, it was just, boy, that was one weird stadium that probably never should have had football games in it. Of course, everyone back then had that old crazy AstroTurf too that was just awful. It was just like carpet on concrete.
It looks like the SEC, Alabama only got you can only buy beer at an Alabama game since 2022. So that's still relatively new. So it's
And I guess I kind of get where they're coming from, where the fans are kind of rowdy anyway, but still by that
tailgating and all that. Yeah,
right. I mean, you may as well make some money off of it, right?
maybe that's where they were hoping people would sober up. I think it
Well,
just ended
once
up
they
people.
saw the stream they were missing out on, though, it's like, okay, let's sell beer, because that's. I mean, how much money someone at UC knows this. I wonder what just a sellout crowd at Nippert. I wonder how much beer money is made on that game.
Well, certainly beats letting people sneak in,
Right.
the travel size liquor to throw in their Coke or whatever. So good.
Would you believe we snuck a quarter barrel in the Nippert once?
Look, some of the stories you tell me at this point, I'll believe about three-quarters of what you'd say. Yeah.
Well, that's mid 80s.
No surprise here.
It was in a trash can with balloons on top of it. We were going to release balloons after UC's first score, allegedly. There was no helium in those balloons. They were just covering a keg. So it got in. But back then, you didn't, that was before 9/11. Nippert wasn't full. It was half full if you were lucky. And they were just glad people were coming in. And we were we still students in? That would have been early 80s if that were the case. And I think I was with some younger students. I think I was a former student at that point and probably should have known better. And what was funny is in the third quarter, our keg blows, and this kid I knew was there with his old fraternity buddies, and they had one too. They're like, here, we can get rid of some of this. Take ours. And they're filling our cups up in the stands at Nippert Stadium in the student section of the UC game, which back then you sat more on the side. The student section wasn't down in that horseshoe end. It was more on the side. And I think you could pretty much sit wherever the hell you wanted. But yeah, that happened.
Unbelievable. I did find a couple more stats on young Brendan Sorsby I wanted to give you. He's completing 66.3% of his pass attempts. His 165.6 efficiency rating leads the Big 12, and his QBR of 80.6 ranks third in the conference.
Man,
crazy.
They knew what they were targeting when they went for him. And Indiana's doing well without him. I mean, they off to a hell of a start over there. But I am so glad they targeted this young man and they were able to get him in here, because it's nothing against what they tried to do last year. It was kind of a Hail Mary desperation deal, because that's a situation they were in, and that's kind of the guy Satterfield had targeted early. It didn't work. This one definitely is working.
Well, and it seems like it's worked out for both Indiana and Cincinnati. So
yeah, Indiana definitely needed a coaching change and something. And boy, good for UC for going in there and swooping up this talented quarterback, because he does look like the real deal. And everything he does, he just doesn't seem to get rattled. He just seems to really know what he's doing. He's impressive, very impressive. He looks like a football player.
Well, let's look at the other side of that coin. Some people who didn't look like football players this weekend. Cincinnati Bengals, their defense did not look like football players this weekend. However, the offense said, we're going to win this game despite you, despite Andy Dalton. And they went ahead and did that.
It was great to see that offense look like it did. And you know what? I just feel like kind of somewhat overshadowed, but maybe not because they accounted for 3 of the touchdowns, but the running backs were like productive in what they were asked to do. And thank God, we saw a little more Chase Brown, and nothing against Zach Moss, but Chase has been very impressive since he came in as a rookie and played in the preseason. And he's got that burst, and it just seems like he gets through the holes quick. He can help this football team if he gets a little more opportunities, and he was able to do that Sunday. And while that went on, Zach Moss looked pretty darn impressive too, and that play before the half was phenomenal. And especially reading about it later when he's like, I thought no way in hell the ball's coming to me, right? The clock's running out. It's time for one more play. It's do or die. You got to get in on 4th down, I believe it was. And so you figure the ball's going to go into the end zone, and it doesn't, and he's catching it out there in the flat and then has to make a move. How he kept his balance, I don't know. He got the hand down and stayed up and then powered his way in, and I just thought that was an impressive play. And so I was really pleased with that aspect. Obviously, Joe Burrow played a great game, Jamar Chase, and what he did and bouncing off that tackle when that guy tried to steamroll him with the shoulder. That was hilarious. I don't know how you stay on your feet. I mean, I know they talk about how strong Jamar is and just, not upper body, and which is very strong, but lower body is just off the charts. That was like a pinball, the guy hitting off him, and then off he goes, I don't know, 60-some yards. That was an impressive display. Good to see. We'll get to that defense and the downside and what's coming up here in a minute, but I just thought that was a huge effort by Moss right before the half. Jamar looked great. T was good, all his damage in the first half, but and a shout out to the fans too, because I know Zach Taylor talked about this, I think it was Monday, but I noticed that during the game. Like, first of all, when you saw shots of the crowd, there was a lot of black and orange there in Charlotte. And then when you heard the crowd, it's like you didn't really know, like if you didn't know the game was in Carolina, you just judged off crowd noise. You could have thought like the Bengals had home field advantage in this thing. I guess everyone circled this game because it's drivable and, it's a different spot to go see a game for the fans. But they had a hell of a turnout down there. And Zach's right. I think the Bengals I don't think people realize how many of these fans do actually travel for these games for the Bengals. And that's Cincinnati in general, though, because I feel like UC gets pretty good crowds on the road a lot of times. I mean, they took over Notre Dame a few years ago. And when we were down at the college football playoffs, I mean, the turnout down there in Dallas and the number of people from Cincinnati down there, because that's not a cheap deal. And it's like, it's not something you plan 6 months out. You find out and you find a way to get there. And I mean, there were Cincinnati people everywhere. So shout out to these people for making those trips and supporting these teams, because I just felt like that was pretty darn impressive.
It's not something that Cincinnati fans plan 6 months out to go to the college football playoff, but some of your upper echelon SEC teams start to plan out, well, how are we going to get to, and now they have to worry about how many playoff games they're going to have to start spending money on.
Yeah, that's true too. And I remember the first year of the playoffs, and Ohio State's playing Bama in the Sugar Bowl in a national semifinal, and it was New Year's Eve. And the number of Alabama fans, I just, I'm sitting by them, and the number of and I was down there for work, by the way, but they just gave us, like, you got press overflow. So you're just out in the crowd. And this lady behind me, young lady, bitching to her boyfriend that they even have to play this game, that they should be in the national title game. And why do they have to play some stupid semifinal and spend money on this when they're going to the national championship game? And they shouldn't have to spend this money. And so immediately I'm like, I really kind of hope the Buckeyes win this thing now. Because they really were put off, and not just her, a bunch of them were put off that they even had to. Why do we even have to play this game? We should be in the national championship game. So it's like that was Cardell Jones and that bunch, and I'm like, I was actually tickled pink that they stuck at the Bama in that game just because of the arrogance of them being just taking offense that they had to play in a playoff game to get to the national championship.
Look, down there, they don't give a piss about nothing but the Tide. But in any case.
I was stuck in St. Louis once for a Red Series, and in our hotel comes these buses of these it was some, workers union, something. They were having their convention there for some reason, but it was all these people from Alabama. You would get on the elevator in July, and these guys older than me, you get on the elevator and stand there like this, and you walk in, they just go, "Roll Tide." And that's like, oh my God, it's July. Get over yourselves. You're 70 some years old. Don't you have something else to think about? Like maybe, is this union getting your pension right? It's just, what the hell?
Well, I did have friends who actually traveled to the game in Carolina, and they said what's normally a 7.5 hour drive turned into, because of the hurricane and Hurricane Helene, ended up being like a 12-hour drive, I believe they said.
They're lucky they made it. What a nightmare that whole thing is.
Yeah.
It's awful.
So you have to commend anybody who actually made it to the game from Cincinnati, because if you had planned on leaving day of, I don't know how that would have worked for you necessarily.
It wouldn't have. I mean, I-40 down there is decimated down there around Asheville and the Carolina-Tennessee border. Terrible. Just terrible. I don't know how they're ever going to fix that, because, I mean, there's landslides and all that, and you got to get that ground stable. This isn't going to be an easy fix. And I really feel for those people down there. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, terrible. I don't know what you do about it. Like, how do you prepare for that when you're in areas like that? I know my heart goes out, because there's nothing you can do. I always think about, like, what if that kind of stuff happens here? It's just terrible. What do you do? Cross your fingers, I guess.
And you have to hope that you make it through the rest of the hurricane season without anything coming back for more.
Right.
But that all said, in the football game, Andy Dalton, God bless him, 25 of 40, 220, 2 touchdowns and a pick. The Bengals did get hurt a little bit by the run game, 155 yards largely by Chuba Hubbard with 104 and a touchdown. The 220, not terrible through the air. And I will say, DJ Turner is much improved this season.
How about that? I was thinking of you. When he came in, and I don't think, he Cam Taylor-Britt had some plays that went against him in that game.
They pulled him out.
Yeah, they felt good enough about DJ to put him in, and that's not. I don't think. I still think Taylor-Britt's going to be fantastic. He's in year 2. He's. He got his hands on that one ball. I don't know how he did that. I don't know how he did it. He did get beat early in that route, but he made a hell of a recovery, and maybe the ball was underthrown a little bit. But that was a hell of a play. That kid.
It's a shame it got called back.
Bullish on him. Yes, it did get called back, but I'm still bullish on him. But when you can have a guy like DJ come in now, who's also, in his second year, and perform like that when they needed it, and they got some other young DBs that are showing up a little bit that are helping, and I think they're going to need that, because they're beat up so much up front. I'm scared to death about Sunday, and maybe we don't want to get to there yet, but boy, they're taking a beating up there, and you got to hope those defensive linemen can make it back, because that is a problem coming in from Baltimore this week.
It's a trend.
Is a problem.
It's a trend in Cincinnati at this point. Both the Bearcats and the Bengals are both just carrying mash units right now on their defensive line. Trey Hendrickson got injured as well. You hope he's back next week.
Right.
Although Joseph Asai did come in and play pretty well. He graded well anyway. So we'll see. Von Bell makes up for last week and his poor grade last week with an interception this week. I think the secondary had quite a bounce back because while it is Andy Dalton and we do temper expectations for Andy Dalton, he's a backup for a reason. Although behind Bryce Young, who knows? But 220 yards is nothing in the NFL. Truly, it's nothing in the NFL.
No, you're right. When it's something is when it's backed up by 155 yards rushing. But but I get what you're saying. And the problem was the run. It wasn't Andy Dalton, although God bless him. I heard he's like 25th now on the list all time for touchdown passes in the NFL. Would you have ever guessed that?
No.
But
I did hear AJ Green was in attendance, his favorite target to throw those touchdowns.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I would have. I guess AJ would be rooting for the Bengals. I guess I don't know.
Andy Dalton, can you vote? Can you root for both? I think you can probably root for both.
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can. But yeah, I do worry about what's coming up. The defense has got to get some guys back because this thing coming in Sunday and what I watch now is Baltimore the best team in the world right now. They're what, 2-2? Lost a tough game to Kansas City, but then when you look at these last two wins,
200 yards,
274 against Dallas, 271 against Buffalo on the ground. Now, they found something now with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and that tandem and what they can do. And you saw what Derrick did, on the first drive of the game, first play of the game, I believe. It's the nightmare I was afraid of when Derrick Henry ended up there. You wanted to think that this dude was slowing down, right? And it kind of looked that way in Tennessee. And you're like, okay, he gets there, and you got Lamar who's lightning, and you got this guy who can be lightning, but he's a moose too. That moose on that run was the fourth fastest timed player in terms of miles per hour on that run in the NFL this season. 30 years old, Derrick Henry, at his size, 230 plus pounds, and he runs 20-some miles an hour on that run. That is frightening stuff. And so that's going to be a chore. That's going to be a chore, and that's going to be in my book, a lot of times we think these storylines coming into games are going to be the storylines, and they're not. I can't see this not being the determining factor how the Bengals handle this ground game. There's just no other way to look at it.
Well, Vegas apparently looks at it a little bit differently, as the Ravens were only opened as 3-point favorites, and that line has moved to 2.5. And I don't know. Maybe that's enough confidence in this Bengals offense to go ahead and keep up with whatever it is that the Ravens throw at you, regardless of what your defense does, much like it did the last 2 weeks.
I want to believe that's the case. I really do. And I do think, we know what potential the Bengals offense has. And when you've got an involved Jamar Chase, it's that much better. And then you see this, the way they used Chase Brown and Zach Moss on Sunday. And really, Zach gets a lot of grief for a lot of things, but that was well done and well complemented each other. I just thought they did very, very well in that department and making those guys stand out. And did what they had to do to win, because with that defense beat up the way it was, even though you're facing Andy Dalton, you got to outscore the other team, and that's obviously what they did. But that's what they're going to have to do this Sunday, probably. I mean, we'll see. It's God, I love this stuff. I love this stuff because you don't know what's going to happen. It's the end of the world if they lose, right? If you go 1-4, you're kind of cooked. You're kind of cooked.
Well, and I that was the message.
You're not. It's still early. Mathematically, you're not cooked. But my God, to start 1-4 and make the playoffs.
Yeah, that was the message that Zach gave in the locker room. I did watch the video of the game ball presentation and the the locker room speech that the clip that they share anyway, and he made sure to tell them this is our first division game, and this means a lot. If we can win this one, things change, and he's not wrong.
No, it changes the whole look. If they come out of this debacle and of a start to the season of 0-3 and can beat the Ravens and be 2-3, and God knows, but there's still plenty of time. But I get too influenced when I watch a game and it's the last game and I see Baltimore do what they did to Buffalo, because they just I don't want to use the term I just about threw out because it probably wouldn't reflect well on me. But they got smoked. I mean, they got absolutely abused.
Another thing that both the Bearcats and the Bengals have in common is you have to start winning games that you're not supposed to win. And this is one of those games for the Bengals against the Ravens you're not supposed to win.
Well, I would have said before the season, though, that at home, the Bengals should win this game. If they're the team we think they are, if they are a Super Bowl contender, an AFC championship contender, then they should win this game at home.
Well, right now, given the injuries and given what you've seen this season, I don't think they're supposed to win this game. And I think that makes this game one of those games that you're not supposed to win.
And you're looking at, what is it? You get roughly 2.5, 3 points at home. So, yeah, you're looking at now a 5-point spread or whatever, 5.5-point spread if it were on the neutral field, which, again, that's one score. So you're in the game. It's not like they're going to get, predicted to be blown out. But I'm anxious to see this. I'm so anxious to see this. I don't know what I'm going to see. I don't know. And the Bengals may not know because they don't know. I mean, is BJ Hill going to be back? Is Sheldon Rankins going to be back? Is Miles Murphy finally going to be able to play? I don't know. But they need those guys.
Cam Taylor Britt going to be less erratic than he was against Carolina? I think that's the word they used to describe his play. I think that's what Lou Anarumo actually used, was erratic, but did say that CTB went up and hugged him after the game and understood his place. Well,
we see guys bounce back all the time.
Sure.
Everybody has a bad day. I'm a believer in these things where there are some days you might be the most talented, best player. And I see this happen in golf all the time. Golf's such a weird game. You may be the best, but you wake up one day and it's just not there. And I had these days at work where I couldn't, for whatever reason, I had mental blocks. I had this. I sucked. I don't know why. I woke up the next day. I was fine. Athletes have those days. They do. It's not just like there's no human component where you're just a machine and it happens. There are things. Your body, your brain does things every now and then. Now I sound like a nut job, but there is. There are times you just don't have it.
Cornerback is the hardest position in all of football. You cannot convince me otherwise. Cornerback is the hardest position in all of football. So I'm not going to throw him out with the bathwater at this point.
Never. No. I have. we had this I was at our sponsor's Tavern, Remington Tavern, watching the game Sunday, and we had that conversation. And I tell the guy next to me, who might be the owner, I said, I am so glad that I never had to play or had the skill or anything to play cornerback in the NFL with what you're asked to do and what you have to do. Like, how do you keep up with these guys? And then you got to come up for run support. I think obviously the most important position probably in all of sports is a quarterback on a football team. But right. You're right, the hardest, because you go out there and you get your butt beat on a bomb, everyone knows it. You're a goat, and you got to come back and play the next play or the next time you're out there and you're facing the same guy, and you got. I have admired that position from the time I followed football, and I watched these guys in the 70s, and I'm like, how in the hell can they do this? And back then they could be a lot more physical. You were allowed to grab, and a guy's going up to catch a ball, and you can give him a forearm shiver across the head. You can't do that stuff anymore. But it is so difficult to play that position. Like, how do you know what these guys? And here's the other part of it, Aaron. These guys know as receivers, they can take a play off. They know something's going the other way, and I can half-ass it on this play. A corner never knows that. They got to be 100% locked in every play, or you could get burned. It's crazy. I don't know how they do it. I admire them, and they are tough as nails.
If you get burned, you have to forget about it by the next play.
Yeah, but how do you do that?
I don't have an answer for you there.
No,
but one last topic I wanted to get to before we just check on high school stuff. And actually, even real quick, was there any FC Cincinnati action?
Yeah, they lost Saturday night. Kind of a tough one at home.
They did lose.
Yeah, it was a bad start for them. They were pretty sluggish, didn't do a whole lot early, and ended up losing 2-1. They're in third place now. They're still fine, but they don't have the same mojo they had earlier. You hope they get that back as they roll into the playoffs, but they've got a match tomorrow night against New York City on the road. Looking to bounce back there, but yeah, they need to get back to where they were. They've been very uneven.
It's all these weird breaks in soccer. There's no
doesn't help.
You can't really get into a flow.
I know.
Happy trails to you, Pete Rose, 83 years old. He was a pariah. He was an enigma. He was a lot of different words, for good or for bad. He was a lot of different words. He was polarizing. To
the max.
He was.
That's why this Reds hat is on.
He was the cartoon character come to life, truthfully.
Yeah, he was something else. And I got to spend a lot of time with him early in my career because we had the Reds games on television. He was the player manager, then the manager, and we did this thing with him and Johnny Bench called the Pete and Johnny Show during baseball season. And I was one of the guys who reported for that show and also went out with Pete and Johnny. Like, we would go out and shoot these segments with them every time we had a show, which was either bi-weekly or weekly. I think it was bi-weekly. I can't remember. But I would be out there and saying, okay, now you guys are throwing to me talking about the new uniform or whatever, something stupid, someone else talking about the All-Star game. And here's what they're talking about. Here's how you can lead in. And they would play off each other. And they were a lot of fun to work with. We had a ball. And Pete was terrific to us. Johnny was too. And it's Pete, I would sit in his office and talk to him when he was manager. And he loved the media. And then this thing crops up. And Aaron, he would sit there and look you in the eye and tell you he did not bet on baseball. And this is a bunch of crap. And this was, and he would have you believing when you left the office, maybe he didn't do this. And I remember to this day sitting in my living room, the Dowd report comes out. You had to go to the the courthouse and pay to get a copy of the Dowd report. They would print it off this copier. This is back in the 80s, the late 80s. Yeah, it wasn't like it just came out in a PDF file on the internet or anything like that. You had to go to the courthouse and get this thing. So I go get my copy, go home and read it late at night. I got it late in the evening, go home, and I'm like, I'm reading this sucker. I get 15 pages into this report that's probably 350 pages or more. And it's like, oh my God, he did it. I mean, he did it. And he did. And it was sad because, you know, you'd seen him just years earlier, 4 years earlier on top of the world with that 4192 to pass Cobb. And then here he is at the bottom. And he was his worst enemy the 10 years after that. He really was. Then there were 10 years of where, you know, maybe give him a break. And every now and then he would still do something that he shouldn't, or something would come out. And if he would have just copped to the whole thing from the get-go, he would probably be in the Hall of Fame. I still think it's a shame he's not. I think over the last 10 to 12 years, baseball should have had the wisdom to say, we've got the guy's our all-time hits leader. And my God, Major League Baseball may not want to promote gambling now. And Pete did break the rule, but times have changed. And there may be some other stuff in there and reasons, but certainly nothing he's convicted of. And there's a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame that aren't saints and did things that people would be appalled by. The fact that he passed away and they didn't figure out a way to make this happen is sad to me. I think he should have gotten in before this day came. And it's, to me, that's a bit of a stain on baseball.
If you want to have a room in Cooperstown where you walk in and the only thing that is labeled on this room is an asterisk, you can do that because you're the Hall of Fame. But it's not the Hall. It's not the Hall of Character.
And I did rip on MLB, but the Baseball Hall of Fame is separate. But if MLB said, let's do this, I think they could probably convince the Hall of Fame to do this.
Well, I mean, let's be completely honest. This was Bud Selig and his protege, Rob Manfred, ensuring that Pete never made it in.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. You know, Pete is viewed outside of Cincinnati somewhat differently, although I think probably I would love to see a poll on this. I think overall public perception finally changed. I think for a while it was like, oh, it's another Cincinnati rube. You know, you guys are just full of these gamblers and characters. And hey, maybe we were, but that doesn't mean they didn't do great things on the field that should get them enshrined along with some of the greatest players in history, because he was.
Yeah, to your point, plenty of people did awful things, Pete included, off the field. And just is what it is. That's completely separate from what happened on the field. And
yeah,
that's why
I was afraid of this. I was really afraid that this day was going to come and he wasn't going to be in. And I didn't know, you know, when I saw him with that thing he did about Ohtani, and I saw him sitting there, I'm like, God, he doesn't look as robust as he usually does. And people don't when they get older, but and I think some people around him sensed something was wrong. And I know this weekend in Nashville, when he was at that card show with some of the other teammates, that they sensed something was wrong. And it's such a shame. The word I got was, you know, he was kind of asked, hey, bud, you okay? And he didn't want to talk about it. And he just wasn't really the same this weekend. And it's a shame. I mean, you talk about a chapter of Cincinnati, and not just sports, Cincinnati total history, this was one of the craziest, most famous or infamous, however you want to look at it, chapters in this area's history. Was that guy's life from the early 60s to when he came up as a brash rookie with the Reds, and even before that with his career at Western Hills High School, but going all the way through everything, and then the banishment for baseball, and then everything that happened after. It's a chapter that will never be repeated.
It's going to change the way that they celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the 1975 team next season as well. So,
boy, that's going to be something. Yeah.
Well, on a much lighter note, what are you looking forward to for high school sports this weekend?
This weekend, where do I have that? We got actually, weirdly, end of the season, still some big games. Obviously, Moeller is on a roll, and that big win over LaSalle was impressive. They're playing at Nippert Stadium Friday night against Elder. So,
hey,
how about that? St. X is at Louisville Trinity. We all know about Louisville Trinity. Good program there. Anderson playing a rivalry game against Turpin, and Anderson's rolling. Won 57-6 last week at Milford. They're averaging 51 points a game. Probably heavily favored to win this game. Northern Kentucky, Cooper coming off a big win over Highlands. That was a game that was postponed Friday night. They played it Saturday morning at Highlands, and it came down to the final play. So Cooper playing at Cooper now. Are they 5 and they're playing 5? I think they're undefeated, and they play at Connor, who's 5-1. So it's a big Boone County battle. And then a weird game on the schedule, 2 5-1 teams that you wouldn't think about, Harrison and Mount Healthy. That game intrigues. That's an interesting game. And the fact that both of those teams are 5-1, good Southwest Ohio Conference game right there.
Oh, yeah. I went to Northwest, so I'm familiar with both those teams plenty.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
One of my best buds went there.
All right.
And he's in the major too.
We will discuss that off air, but until next Tuesday, that was another episode of
most ranged individuals I know.
That's another episode of George in the Jungle, brought to you as always by Remington Tavern. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can find them on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. But for George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith. We will see you back here on this channel, the Bearcat Journal channel, to just run another episode of George in the Jungle right back at you next Tuesday at 9. See you then.
Thanks, Aaron.